Hello and welcome to the Rewind, where we dive into the making and legacy of various films from cult classics to award-winning masterpieces. Today's movie is Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice, the 2016 superhero movie that pitted two of comicdom's most iconic characters for the first time in a live-action movie. Directed by Zack Snyder and starring Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck as the titular characters, Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice would go on to be a box office hit, but would divide both critics and the pop culture world, with the film's casting choices and weighty themes praised by some and ridiculed by others with equal measure. Joining me today to talk about Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice is pop culture critic and author Jacob Airey. You can check out his stuff over at StudioJake Media over at Substack. You can also check out the StudioJake YouTube channel as well. I have links for both in the show notes. And you can also check out Jacob's novels over at Amazon. The links for those I will have in the notes as well. Jake, I thank you so very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about it.
I'm excited to talk about this too because I clearly remember when this movie came out. So 2016, that would be 10 years of myself, doing this film beat and such. And we were in the midst of this whole superhero movie thing. Marvel was already in full swing. This is post Avengers. The DCEU and is now, trying to do a little bit of catch up. Um, I was kind of lukewarm on Man of Steel. Some things I really liked, others I didn't. But I was really just curious about what this Batman vs Superman would be, because number one, it's a new interpretation of the Batman after the Dark Knight trilogy. So really curious to see what Ben Affleck would be like, and what Zack Snyder was going to do with both of these characters on the big screen, especially in his hands, his visual approach and the way he kind of approaches story and such. I remember writing at the time, I was overlooking my review at the time, that I wrote at the time, that I was kind of, I liked it a little better than Man of Steel. I think what I really appreciated most about the movie, I really liked the thematic stuff in the movie. I liked the whole aspect of the consequence, the collateral damage that came from the events of Man of Steel at the start of the movie, and how that kind of sets the tone for what we see in Dawn of Justice. The whole point of Superman being this amongst men, and Batman thinking to himself, "Can I kill this god?" And I think in a lot of ways, whenever there's a disaster, people parallels to 9/11 was very big when this movie came out. Whenever there's a disaster like that, people question the Almighty in his actions, and in the form of Superman, the Almighty is there in the form of this character, which Batman deems public enemy number one, and he compromises himself in the movie. And I think those moments in the movie, those themes, I thought very impressive at the time, and I still do, because a lot of superhero movies don't really touch that stuff, especially when it comes to theological aspects. I think Zack Snyder is actually quite good when and touching onto that stuff in the comic book world. There were some things I didn't like, but we'll get onto that later as well. But overall, I thought it was not the knockout, the home run I thought it would be, but still an impressive work overall. What about yourself? Do you remember when you watched the movie, what you thought of it, and has your opinion of it changed over the years?
Well, it's interesting you say because when I read my original view for it, which is still on my Substack, I was a little bit more excited about it than when I watched it on DVD later because I
Mm.
did a review of the Ultimate Edition. My so I came at it because I'm not a Zack Snyder fan. Anyone who has heard me say I think he's a hack, but he is very good visually. I do
Yeah.
think that is his strong suit as a director. And the my thing with him is he doesn't understand the characters he's duplicating. So like uh, people who are more into its cinematic experience tended to like the movie more. But like you said, it caused a pop culture divide because people who read Batman and Superman, like myself, we didn't like it. And like I said, my first viewing of it, I thought it was kind of mediocre.
Mm.
I really liked uh, the idea behind it, the concept behind it. I really like the visuals. I like the final fight scene. My problem with it is kind of there was a lot of plot holes in it, and later they were filled in with the Ultimate Edition, which I guess was his technically his director's cut, if you will. But and if they had been in the theatrical version, it would have made the movie make more sense. And that was kind of where when I wrote my review for the Ultimate Edition, that is where I kind of landed on was I would have liked this better if some of the stuff in this had been in the theatrical version. So, for instance, Superman not being able to see lead, that's not established at all in the theatrical cut. We have no idea why Superman didn't see the bomb, but it's in the Ultimate Edition. And I'm like, why did that scene not get in the theatrical version? And instead, they inserted this 3-minute long scene where there's philosophers and scientists are debating what Superman means. That didn't make any sense to me because, quite frankly, and again, maybe it's different for just someone who goes to see it in a cinematic sense. But for a comic book fan, is I don't need to see Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about what Superman means to me. You know what I mean? But I will say that that going from theater to watching it on the Ultimate Edition, it did go down on me a little, or I went down a level for me just a little bit because I realized I feel like maybe in the cutting room they made some decisions that were very poor for the theatrical release versus for the DVD release and ultimately the director's cut. But honestly, looking back now, I remember going to the theaters, and one of the cool things for Batman history buffs like myself, it's the first theatrical film where Bill Finger got recognized as the co-creator of Batman because he had been ignored forever. He had been recognized a year before in the comics, but this was the first theatrical version where it said Batman created by Bob Kane with Bill Finger. So those aspects of it were I did like about it. Just kind of that history of it.
Speaking of the history, so the whole idea of Batman versus Superman had been around for a very long time before the whole DCEU launch with Zack Snyder's involvement. The earliest report that I could find was back in 2002. Variety talked about how Warner Brothers, or Warner Media now as it's known, hired Andrew Kevin Walker, who was a guy who wrote Seven and Sleepy Hollow. He was going to pen a screenplay that will pair Batman and Superman together, and Wolfgang Peterson, who for a lot of people did things like The Perfect Storm, Neverending Story, films like that. He was attached to direct the movie. So that was kind of like the first kind of foray that Warner went down to do this. So they had a whole bunch of different films in development. Warner did Batman movies. Darren Aronofsky was attached to a Batman Year One. John Peters was working on a Superman film. Catwoman that will eventually become the Halle Berry Catwoman that was also in development this time. So this was another one of those that was in there. Walker's draft, according to a 2003 article I found in The Guardian, was deemed to be too dark, which makes sense. He's a guy who wrote Seven, so it might be. So Akiva Goldsman, who's kind of like now it's kind of like a second hand when it comes to a lot of these kind of superhero stuff. I think he might have worked on the X-Men stuff. I'm not 100%. I think he might have. He was coming in to do a rewrite, and then all of a sudden, Wolfgang Peterson puts Batman vs Superman on hold because he wanted to do Troy, the movie with Brad Pitt, in there as well. And also casting wise, I don't know if you noticed the two names that were supposedly cast for this Wolfgang Peterson movie before it was put on hold, Colin Farrell and Josh Hartnett as Batman and Superman. Sounds very interesting. Do you think like a movie with Colin Farrell and Josh Hartnett early 2000s directed by Wolfgang Peterson, that would have been a kind of interesting Batman Superman movie to watch, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree. I tend to not like when Batman and Superman are together. I tend to not like the darker stories. I like sort of the happy middle where we've got kind of the hope and optimism of Superman versus the gritty realism of Batman. And I think that would have been really interesting. Wolfgang Peterson is a fantastic director. And I'm not sure about the casting choices, I'm going to be honest, but I probably would have given it the benefit of the doubt because a lot of people don't remember Batman fans were starved for a theatrical film. We hadn't had one since Batman and Robin, and we all know who that made. So I guarantee a serious take on Batman, even with a Superman film, or I should say with a Superman team up film, sort of a world's finest, that I could see that being highly anticipated. There was actually another one that was also being considered that was supposed to be a sequel to Batman Returns. They were going to ignore Forever and Batman and Robin. This one didn't get as far as long as the Wolfgang Peterson one. That one was just going to be called Batman / Superman. That one, I can't remember who was going to be cast in it, but there were talks that Val Kilmer might have returned. They were just going to ignore George Clooney, but like I said, it was going to ignore Forever and Batman and Robin, but still kind of try to keep it that uh, Tim Burton aesthetic. But that one also did not manifest. I believe Matt Damon was being considered for Superman in that one,
Wow.
but that one was going to be more like Batman is an older hero and Superman is a young, sort of optimistic Boy Scouts, and they're kind of forced to team up. So he's got the curmudgeon, experienced Batman, and then the younger Superman who's only been around for a year. I would have
Sounds
liked to
like
have seen
a
that one as well.
sounds like a buddy comedy almost very
Yeah, but
Lethal
that's
Weapon
kind of
style.
the theme of it. It sounds like.
So it's really interesting when we read about this stuff because what would eventually come from all of this is that they decide not to do the team up and they want the heroes to go their separate ways. So on one end, so on one road, you have what is now known as the Dark Knight trilogy with Christopher Nolan's films, which changed the game when it comes to just superhero movies in general. I mean, it's the type of films that the like at this time, I think with the exception of maybe Spider-Man and X-Men, a lot of superhero movies are kind of panned by critics, kind of seen as more kind of child's play kind of stuff. And that Dark Knight trilogy just changed the game in approach to the casting, the production design, the tone, everything. And so that's set in stone as like a great kind of to this day bar that a lot of these superhero movies kind of have to match up to. And I mean, down the other end of the road, you have Superman Returns, which is the what's that guy's name who did X-Men?
Brandon Roth,
Yeah, Brandon Roth plays Superman. Brian, what's the director's name?
Singer, Brian
Brian
Singer.
Singer. Thank you. He directed the movie. Yeah, Brandon Roth. You had Kate Bosworth, Kevin Spacey. They actually shot this in Sydney. I remember because I was working in the city, so sometimes we actually see. I was working in a store, like a DVD CD store. It's called H&V, the biggest one in like the Southern Hemisphere. It's like this huge kind of mecca kind of store that I worked in. And Kevin Spacey would come in at times actually to look
Oh
around,
wow.
and he always asked for his own movies, which was really funny. So we were going around trying to find all these films for him. Um, but that didn't do what they hoped it would do. That comes out 2006. It doesn't really land that well. It was I think it's an okay movie, but overall it didn't match what they were hoping that like what Batman will become. So Superman takes a breather again. Batman has his own thing. That's all done. So we come back to the DCEU. We have Man of Steel. It's a relaunch of everything. Zack Snyder's a part of this. He done Watchmen. He's done 300, Dawn of the Dead, all these films. He's kind of like the next guy. He's kind of like tipped to almost be like the next Spielberg or Ridley Scott, you know. Um, Man of Steel for me, lukewarm is my best reaction I have to that film. Again, love the visuals. I thought the casting was great. I think Henry Cavill as a Superman is the best one outside of Christian Bale. Not Christian Bale, Christopher Reeve, sorry. I really like that aspect of it, but the movie itself didn't really sit too well with me. I imagine, considering your feelings in regards to Zack Snyder, that Man of Steel didn't sit too well for you as well in regards as a movie as a whole.
That is true. I did like Henry Cavill and I did like Amy Adams. I thought that
Yeah.
they did fantastic. And the roles. My main again though, it came down to I didn't feel like Zack Snyder understood the character he was trying to portray on screen. It was very dim and dark, and I know they were trying to go the opposite way that Marvel was going, which had again sort of this optimistic outlook. So they thought, hey, let's go a little bit darker with Man of Steel. And again, reading my review of it, it's very like I hope this turns into something good. Like I did seem to enjoy it a little bit, but I didn't like the character assassination of Jonathan Kent. Again, this is from a comic book perspective. He's not the good dad that Clark grew up with. He's very what I'm trying to think of a good word to describe him, but
He's
he just see
incredibly cynical. Incredibly
yes,
cynical
yeah,
is what he
that's
was. Yeah.
exactly
He
very
he he
cynical.
is he funny enough it's played by Kevin Costner. He would be what Jonathan Dutton Jonathan Dutton in
Yes,
Yellowstone. It was very much similar vein, I think, in a lot of the ways that he approached the world, which is, just take care of you and don't worry about anyone else. And which I think was very very short-sighted, I believe.
Yeah, and it was things like that. I did one of the things I mentioned in my review was it felt like it was the plot of Superman 1 and Superman 2 combined. So instead of Superman just kind of dealing with Lex Luthor, it was he goes straight into 2 and dealing with Zod and his cohorts. And one of the things I did like that Emil Hamilton died. I thought that was another short-sighted thing because he's a big character in the Superman mythology. So it was kind of like, why does he get killed off? He's a very important character to Superman, but also the decisions, the creative decisions, like not having Superman pull Zod out of Metropolis to fight him, kind of Dragon Ball Z style. Goku's always pulling the villain out of the cities. And even there's an animated film called Superman versus the Elite where he's fighting these 4 different vigilantes, and he convinces them to transport him to the moon so that he can fight them and not risk any civilian casualties. So that also I also thought that was a weird thing. Like, why not have Superman haul him away and kind of have like Metropolis like look on at a distance? Because that also would go with what Snyder was going for, that this man is separated from us. He's bigger. He's possibly a deity, right? So it's that was kind of my takeaway. But like I said in my review, I was kind of like, I hope 2 is better because I want to see that optimistic, hopeful Superman. But then, of course, that didn't happen in Dawn of Justice.
David S. Goyer is the screenwriter, or very much like a big part of all of this kind of stuff that's happening. And he has history with superhero movies. Blade, I think, is like his big kind of calling card. And also he worked on the Dark Knight trilogy stuff as well. I think, what's your interpretation of his reputation amongst superhero movie fans? He does have legacy, but he also has something else going with him, which is he likes doing stuff outside the box. Like, for example, the Lanterns TV show that's coming out. He said he doesn't like the color, something about him not liking the color green, so the emitted green from and a lot of people like, it's Green Lantern. What the hell are you talking about? It seems like I think sometimes writers and directors, when they approach this stuff, they get a little cute with the source material, and they want to try to change it and make it their own. And while that's okay, you want to try to make something original out of a property that's been around for a while. There's a reason why a lot of these elements work, and there's a reason why a lot of people like it. And I think some of the things that Goya does, with some of the material he has, especially in regards to the Superman character with the cynicism and the darkness, um, which is totally against what I always imagine Superman to be. Like, when I look at your shirt right now and I see the blue and the red, those are to me are optimistic colors, the blue, red, and yellow. When they come together, that's a color of hope and everything else. And they do mention in the story, like, the patch, that means hope in my world, but the hope isn't felt through the movie. And I think that's something that's really like a missed opportunity that they had. And it bums me out because our love for Henry Cavill is there, but it just really seemed like he never had the right superhero property as a movie, Superman movie, to do his stuff in. And I've always thought that was a shame that it wasn't that opportunity to have like an optimistic, hopeful Superman movie with a Henry Cavill starring in it.
Yeah, and to answer your question about David Goyer, I felt like he had a lot of street cred because of Blade.
Right.
So whenever a nerd like us, when I love the Blade films, I think that they're an excellent adaptation of the comic book source. Yes, they take liberties, especially Blade Trinity, but which I can't remember if Goyer was involved with that one or not. But the point is, you still feel like there is a respect for the source material, and I feel like in recent years there's been like this, hey, you have to deconstruct these characters
Hmm.
because maybe a cinematic audience won't like it. So like I was mentioning with Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice, my cinematic friends are all telling me how much they love it, and I'm like, oh yes, but if you just read Enemies and Allies, which is a novel based on the first meeting of Batman and Superman, you would change your mind because it's totally different. It's more hopeful, more optimistic, and there's no Wonder Woman in it. Maybe that's a
Hmm.
downside to it. But with Goyer, I feel like he's kind of become a victim of. I've seen a lot of directors and screenwriters this happen where they get in their own way,
Yeah.
and instead of exploring what makes those characters good and fun and enjoyable, or even contemplative and thoughtful, and in some, and maybe in some cases inspirational. They want to deconstruct them through a lens that uh, I don't really know where it comes from. Some people say it's a political lens. I just think it's a little bit of hubris where they think, oh,
Mm.
okay, I wrote these big hits, it'll translate over here to this thing, because Blade is not hopeful and optimistic. It's very cynical, it's dark, it's brooding. So let's try to translate that onto Hal Jordan, Green Lantern. That just doesn't make any sense in that high, in that realm, because DC and Marvel forget about the fact that they have different characters. Their universes are very distinct and different. And Marvel is more sci-fi, DC is more magical, it's way more fantasy based. So it's very even Green Lantern is space magic, right? Green Lanterns get their power from a giant lantern on a planet. So
Yeah.
it's very different. And I feel like Goyer just couldn't get it out of his own way. And I actually wrote on my pickaxe, I wrote a kind of a funny argument, or a funny thought experiment, where I said, oh, let's take out this word from this other thing. So instead of Sonic the Hedgehog, we'll take out Sonic. It's just the Hedgehog. So
Hmm.
it was stuff like that. And you realize how silly it sounds in other contexts. So why wouldn't it be silly for lanterns? But that's really how I feel about David Goyer. Is I just think that he just got in his own way, and he's using up all that goodwill that he had from even Man of Steel. Really, I know he helped with that script, but I think he's kind of dried it up a little bit, and I don't think, like a lot of directors and screenwriters, they realize they're not realizing their street cred has been used up.
Christopher Nolan is a part of all of this as well in regards to as a producer as well. I think he helped out with some of the writing of the Man of Steel, specifically not as a screenplay thing, but more for story kind of idea. Interestingly, I saw this report back in 2021. Zack Snyder was talking with Josh Horowitz from the MTV kind of like channel thing. I think he does Happy Sad Confused, the podcast. And he was saying that early discussions in 2010, before they were doing filming, just shooting ideas, that there was a little bit of an idea of maybe basing Superman in the Nolan universe, in the Batman universe, like not having it as a standalone, but having Superman in that kind of thing. I don't know. I mean, that sounds kind of interesting. They didn't go down that road. I think that was for the better, though. I think having the trilogy just as the trilogy, its own kind of thing, without anything else in there, works way better than having like introduction of other superhero characters in there. Um, so 2013, San Diego Comic-Con. Um, this was back when Comic-Con, the San Diego Comic-Con especially, was like a really big thing, like the announcements and the trailers and everything like that. These days, I think it's become, I think I think that the studios have milked that event for as much as they can over the decades, sorry, that now it's not as, the audio announcements and stuff doesn't have the same kind of pop and electricity that it used to have. But this announcement back in 2013 was quite something else. What's the name of the actor who was reading Batman's part on the stage? Harry something or other.
Oh,
Um, Harry. I forgot what his name was. But anyway,
I
having
can't
him up,
remember. I watched
having
it. I
him,
can't remember though.
yeah, I know, I'm the same. Having him up there say the words from Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns that Batman says to Superman in the movie, and then having the Superman symbol come up on the screen of stage, followed by the Batman symbol, and people's reaction to that. Like I'm thinking about it now, I get goosebumps because I think it was just a really smart way to get it done.
It was a
Um,
great moment, no doubt
a
about
great
it.
movement, and it was an interesting kind of thing is that Snyder actually said that it was kind of like a idea that just kind of came out of nowhere. They're talking about Batman, like the next Man of Steel movie, and then he's like, you know, what about Batman? Why can we have Batman in this? And that's kind of like how the wheels started rolling and everything else. Um, and something that he said as well is that at the time, which I think was, I'm just trying to find out when his interview was. I think it was 2021. He said, Batman and Superman teach us about ourselves. The way we track Batman through a cinematic history, he does have the license to enter our world and be a real character and not a complete cartoon. And he's able to tell us about the way we live in our society. Superman less so, but I think Batman definitely sort of reflects us in a more personal way. Do you think that's kind of accurate in regards to the Batman characters? Does Batman kind of represent a lot of the things that kind of the real world is going through? Does he represent a lot of these things, considering that he is a superhero in the fact that he's not an alien, that he's not magic, he's not, whatever, bitten by a spider, whatever else. He's just a guy, just like who takes on the justice injustices of the world on his own kind of broad shoulders and such. I think it's a really kind of interesting perspective that Snyder has about this character. Or do you think like some other things that Snyder has that he's kind of off base in kind of how he views Batman?
Well, I struggle with this because I prefer it when Batman is not a reflection of the real world. But writers have done that. Frank Miller has done that, and even one of my favorite Batman writers of all time, Chuck Dixon, he has done that in his writing. And there's nothing wrong with those interpretations inherently. My problem with it is positioning the whole God versus man thing. I'm not sure Batman is the right avatar in that scenario, and especially with his his one rule, which Snyder immediately tossed out. But
Yeah.
right off the bat, like I said, as electric as that moment was with the Superman symbol coming down, he was reading from The Dark Knight Returns, right? Reading that monologue. I feel like Zack Snyder only read The Dark Knight Returns. He didn't
Mm.
read any other source material, including like from Chuck Dixon or Grant Morrison or Paul Dini or I could name names all day. The point is, I feel like with a lot of especially film writers, what makes the mistakes they make are they just read Frank Miller because his run is so spectacular. And I'm not trying to take away from that. That's one man's interpretation of the Batman universe. And he was definitely a reflection of how we can stand up to these forces like the Joker or whoever it is, a Two-Face and whatnot, or even the Falcones, right? They're just regular gangsters. They don't have any gimmick or whatnot. But then you have writers like uh, or then you have movies like the Nolan verse, the Nolan trilogy. They didn't just read Frank Miller; they read Jeff Loeb. And in fact, The Long Halloween is cited as one of the inspirations for The Dark Knight. You have they also read Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on a Serious Earth. That is what influenced a lot of Heath Ledger's motivations behind the character. And in both of those stories, The Long Halloween and Serious House on Serious Earth, I feel like those were a return to Batman's more pulp era, where he's this sort of larger than life lone vigilante taking on the world. And I prefer that version of Batman, sort of an aspirational, even if he is dark version of Batman. That's my personal taste. I don't have a problem with, hey, let's make Gotham City a reflection of the real world, and Batman can be our real life reaction to something like this happening. I don't have a problem with those kinds of stories. It's just a preference for me. But I feel like Snyder took it way too far with the God versus man debate on this. Because again, I don't see Batman being the person who needs to be the to embody that, if you will. But I don't think he's off base with that specific comment. I think that is a perfectly fine take on Batman. That's certainly how Tim Burton approached it when he did Batman and Batman Returns, and Joel Schumacher even when he did Batman Forever. Not so much Batman and Robin,
No, we don't know
but
what was
definitely
going on with that. We don't know what
yeah.
was going on with that movie.
Well, and even Bruce Timm, to some degree, if you watch his works on Batman the Animated Series, there is definitely the aspirational Batman, but also the more personal Batman. Like a great example is the Baby Doll episode, where Batman realizes the villain just doesn't want to be lonely anymore, and he shows her some compassion throughout the episode. So there is both those. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it. Is I feel like that filmmakers want to take it too far with let's make Gotham City a microcosm of America or the world, if that makes sense.
The Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you'll love. Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of it was going on because it was post what Iraq War, Afghanistan War, and all the kind of reflections of 9/11. And I think some filmmakers, you know, like to have kind of tap into the psychology of an era, and kind of like have their characters kind of, yeah, and that's fine and all. But my opinion of the whole thing is that, especially when it comes to Batman, is that I always found Batman to be a guy about justice, but it's kind of like he's more kind of like community justice. It's about what's going on in Gotham. It's not like the world, like a world thing. It's not what's happening in his backyard. He can't. He's the type of guy. He can't be Superman. He can't be everywhere at once. He knows where his limitations are in regards to his city. His city is his world. And that's what I really like about some of my favorite Batman movies is that, especially like the Nolan movies, is that it's about him trying to take back the city from the corruption has engulfed it. And I think that's really cool. But he's trying to do it there. He's not flying over anywhere else. And there might be a scene where, for example, he might need to extract someone from China, like in The Dark Knight, which is that cool scene he does when he finds that accountant and brings him back to Gotham City. But that has to do with Gotham City. It doesn't have to do with anything else but that. So I really dug that kind of thing. I do like how, in DC especially, every character kind of like has their own stomping grounds. Superman's for Metropolis, Batman's for Gotham, what have you. And so I dig that as well. So having kind of like Batman kind of be like a representative of all the world's kind of like ills and trying to fight against that kind of, I think subject wise, I think as a kind of like existential kind of exploration of the character is pretty interesting. But overall, again, kind of doesn't tap into what I like about the character on its own, which is also something that I really like about the new Batman film with Robert Pattinson. It's very much a Gotham set story about Gotham problems, and he's like the solution for that. I want to talk about the casting. So there's a few names here. I'm not going to talk about Henry Cavill or anyone else. That's a Man of Steel thing. I want to talk about the new names here. Bruce Wayne Batman being the biggest of them all. So we just finished with the Nolan films. You had Christian Bale. He put his stamp on it for a lot of people. He's kind of like the guy. I know for yourself, Christian Bale is like your kind of like your Batman guy as well. Um, Now you have to follow up that. So who do you go for? So I found this Hollywood Reporter article in 2013 that said sources said six names are in contention. So these are the six names they said in 2013. Interestingly, Ben Affleck's not mentioned in any of them. Josh Brolin, Ryan Gosling, Joe Manganiello, Matthew Good, Richard Armitage, and Max Martini. So those were the six names at the time. Now, of those, the only thing I can really find of any of those names was Josh Brolin, and of those six names, Josh Brolin, I found a quote where he said that he did talk about the role with Zack Snyder. He said that they had disagreements about the approach to the character. And he said that this was back in 2014. He said there were several reasons why we said it wasn't the best idea on both sides. He didn't say what they were. I imagine maybe the things we're talking about now could be his approach to it as well, maybe. Jason Momoa said he auditioned for the role of Batman in 2018, and Jake Stacey said that he kind of came in and he kind of did his own version of what Christian Bale did in The Dark Knight and did all his stuff. And then they said that was really good, and then they called him back and offered him Aquaman, which caught him by surprise. And then there was another name that's attached to this as well. In that, in 2021, in the Hollywood Reporter, Snyder said that he had conversations with another actor just in case Affleck said no, which is the Belgian actor Matthias Schoenaerts. He's an actor. He
Not
was in
familiar with him.
if you saw him, you'll know him. He was in The Drop with Tom Hardy.
Oh, okay.
He was in this bunch of other films as well. He was in Red Sparrow with Jennifer Lawrence. He was in a whole bunch of these movies. So he said he talked to him about it a lot. He never got in the suit, but he did do a bunch of mock-ups on him because Ben was on the fence. So Ben Affleck was on the fence. Now the reason why Scrodart said he didn't want to do it, and there's a link I'll send to you, and I'll put it in the show notes as well. Matthias Scrodart was in like a TV show in his native Belgium, I think, or what, maybe it was in France. I'm not sure what. Um, and he's in this room with another guy, and the guy says to him, "Is it true that you were offered Batman?" And Matthew says, "Yeah, I did. However, I was only in my early 30s at the time, and I needed someone in their 40s, and I didn't want to, take on the role or anything like that." And he also said that, he always found the villains to be much more interesting than the Batman himself. He said Batman's kind of like the least interesting. Like if they offered him the Joker, for example, like he would have taken it in a heartbeat. So he was an actor as
I've
well.
heard a
He's
couple of
actually quite
actors have said that.
yeah, and I believe it as well because I think the cool thing about Batman is that, um, he is kind of like the he's the anchor of the universe, but it's kind of like everything else around him is what makes that universe kind of move, like the villains and everything else. He's kind of like the centerpiece of it all. In the end, we did go to Ben Affleck. Supposedly, they said he was the first choice. And Charles Roven, the producer of the movie, said to the Hollywood Reporter, they wanted a very mature Batman because Cavill was like a young actor, but they also wanted someone who was tougher and rugged, and they also wanted someone with a big stature because Ben Affleck is 6'4" in real life. He's actually quite a big guy, and so we wanted Batman to tower over Superman. So while Superman, of course, is more powerful, Batman was kind of like the physically like if you just put them if you put them next to each other and you wouldn't know the difference, you'll think that Batman be the one to be able to kick his ass, right? And Affleck could do that. Affleck said that he was reluctant at first because he didn't fit the traditional mold, and a lot of the fans agreed with him in that there was a number of petitions that went up straight away. A lot of people weren't happy with Affleck being cast in there. I myself found it to be very interesting, but out of left field casting. I never thought that Ben Affleck would play Batman, but when I watched the movie, I was kind of surprised and really happy with what he did with the film. What was your reaction when Affleck took on the role? And is any of these other names would have been interesting to you as well in regards to playing the Batman that we mentioned before?
I actually signed one of those petitions to get him fired, believe it or not. I because and by the way, that is not a knock against Ben Affleck's acting. I think he's a phenomenal actor. I also think he's a very talented director. I just did not think he was right for that role.
Right.
Especially because I did hear about those names that you mentioned, but I also heard Scott Adkins at one point was considered. Now he's a
Mm,
B movie actor, so that
yeah.
might have been why he was passed over. I actually heard that later he was also considered for the Batman before it became the Batman. It was going to be a different movie, but they ultimately went with Affleck. Brolin, I would not have been opposed to it, but he just doesn't look like Bruce Wayne. I
Right.
could see him being physically imposing as Batman, but I cannot see him playing Bruce Wayne very well. But Ryan Gosling is an absolute no for me. I actually, on my original website, I did write an article reacting to Ryan Gosling being mentioned, and it was not a nice article. I've made fun of Gosling. I regret that now because again, he's grown on me as an actor. But probably if it's difficult to say who I would have liked more because going from thinking the movie was mediocre to not liking it as much, it's hard to say who I would thought have done better. I It's interesting with Momoa because I actually think for the world that the DCEU, the DC Extended Universe, that's what they were calling the franchise at the time, uh, that he would have fit more with Snyder's vision of what he wanted. Momoa is huge. He's a very
Mm,
physically imposing character. I will say though, to Affleck's credit, if Snyder wanted a Frank Miller Batman, Affleck definitely embodied that. If you read, especially All Star Batman and Robin or The Dark Knight Returns, that Affleck nailed that out of the park. I did think that he got that, and even uh, the suit. And that was another thing I had an issue with. I don't like the Fat Bat suit. I don't like it on Frank Miller's work. I don't like it in Absolute Batman, which is being written by Scott Snyder, not related to Zack Snyder. I that's just not my jam. I prefer the one that's on your shirt that you showed me before we went live. That's my yes, exactly. I
right
like
there,
that
that one
Batman
there.
emblem.
Yep.
or the one in the Dark Knight. The simplified one is fine too. I just don't like the huge overdone one. But I will give Affleck credit. He was told, "Hey, we're doing the Frank Miller Batman," and Zack Snyder has worked with Frank Miller. Frank Miller wrote 300, the graphic
Mm.
novel that the movie is based on. So it makes sense that he would want that influence in the movie. But yeah, I wasn't happy with it. Since though the DCU has come to an end, and I've seen him in other movies like the theatrical version of Justice League and even the Flash, I've kind of loosened my criticism on him a little bit because I feel like maybe he just got poor direction for the character. And one movie that really changed my mind about him was The Way Back.
Mm.
He was in a movie where he played an alcoholic coach who got fired, and then he gets a job at a religious school, and it's like him trying to recover from being an
Yeah.
alcoholic. And I was like, okay, this is really good acting. And so I've kind of softened to the idea. So if because there are rumors that the Ellisons want to reignite the DCEU. I don't know if those are true, but if they do, and they announce that Affleck was returning to the role, I might be okay. I would be okay with that. I would like to see him with a different director, for an expansion. I mean, like where he's the main character. But other than that, but that was kind of early on. I was totally opposed to it. To be fair, I was kind of opposed to Christian Bale too, but Equilibrium changed my mind for Christian Bale. I watched Equilibrium. That's a cyberpunk film he was in. It's a small
Yes.
indie film. It's actually a pretty decent film. And I was like,
Kurt
oh,
Remake,
okay,
yeah.
yeah, I could see him playing Batman now after, and that's kind of how The Way Back was with Ben Affleck. But that came after, right? That came after Batman versus Superman. So that's where I landed on it. But as for the other names, like I said, I could see Josh Brolin being a good Batman. Could not see him being a good Bruce Wayne.
Mm.
Ryan Gosling, absolutely not. Just like I said, I respect him more as an actor, especially after seeing La La Land. But I just can't see him as either. I don't think because I know that's a big criticism of Christian Bale. I don't agree with it, but people say he was a good Batman, but not a very good Bruce Wayne. I
Mm.
don't agree with that. I think he was a good Bruce Wayne. But I don't see Ryan Gosling being able to take on either of those. Like I said, I wasn't familiar with the European actor you mentioned. I didn't know he was. I'm not familiar with him, and I've not heard that he was one of the on the short list. But so I don't know how to answer that one. But yeah, that's kind of my take on the others.
Richard Armitage could have been interesting. I think he's got a brooding
He's a good
sensibility,
actor.
I
I could,
think.
yeah, he
Yeah.
definitely. I could see him pull it off.
In the Scott Adkins one, whenever I hear like about these near misses that Scott Adkins has, it kind of bumps me up because I find him to be a
Yeah.
phenomenal action star, movie
Oh
star.
yeah, for sure.
I think he's like one of the best kind of like of his generation action stars to really do it. Even though the material that he gets is more kind of like towards the you know VOD B movie stuff, he always delivers. And I think him
Yeah.
as a Batman would have been fantastic. I really do. So it's a shame that that never happened. The
And
thing
he's a
about
real
Aff
martial artist. He's a real
yes,
martial artist. So he would have
he is.
they would have not had to use as many stunt doubles.
That's true. Very true. The thing about I think Affleck that kind of sold me um, for the role, but like, again, out of left field, I think his work on The Town was really strong. I
That's
really
a good
liked what
movie. Yeah.
he did in that movie as a director as well. And I remember he was supposed to direct a Batman movie as well. He was going to star in directing one. And I thought to myself, oh, if he could bring like a town sensibility to like a Batman film, that would be pretty cool. Because they had some really great car chases and heist scenes and stuff in it. And ironically, his character wears a mask half the time in that movie as well, being a bank robber. I thought it was pretty cool. Yeah, I think he's a director has a really good sense of place, of environment in his movies. Like he's had different movies set in different places, like Boston, of course, being the big one there. But even like Argo, like the stuff that was set in Tehran and stuff, I thought was really strong. Yeah, I think he's the kind of actor to me, that has gotten better with age as he's gotten older. I think a lot of their kind of weariness and such of his maybe his own personal life has really influenced his kind of stuff that he does on screen. He brings that worldly experience, I think, which made the way back such a great movie as well. If it was Gavin O'Connor who directed that, who did Warrior and a bunch of other films as well. So I thought that was yeah. So overall, though, I think that he did a good job as Batman to the point where he's one of my favorites, I think, because I think he pulls it. To me it goes and you're gonna hate me, and but I'm gonna go ahead anyway. Keaton, and then Bale and Affleck tied. I think
Hmm,
both of them tied together. I really
interesting.
like what he does with Batman in this movie, and I think some of the stuff that I really dig about it is I like the anger that he brings to it. I like the physicality that he brings to it as well. And I still think that the fight scene in the warehouse is probably the best Batman fight scene I've seen on screen. The Michael Keaton ones, they never had that happening in a film because the suit was too cumbersome. He couldn't do much with it, even in like Batman Returns, where they kind of lightened the material. He couldn't really move around and such, so he couldn't do it. And Michael Keaton's not, he's not an action guy. He like that was never his stuff. Even though in the Flash they kind of changed it up a little bit with the help of much computer trickery. And I thought that Affleck did a really great job in that in regards of an action star, Batman as an action hero. I thought that really cool stuff he does in the movie. I like as well, kind of like a lot of the approach towards the tech that he has in the film. The
Yeah, that was
the
a good aspect
Batmobile.
of the movie. Yeah,
I thought
that
the
the
Batmobile in
Batmobile
this
did look
movie was
cool, except for
awesome.
the
That
machine gun, but I liked
yeah,
everything else about it.
but that scene where he plows through all those different factories um, chasing after those guys. I think they're trying to. I think it was Lex Luthor's man. I'm not sure, but he just plows right through them just with this tank. I thought it was just fantastic. Again, it's going to borrow in quite a bit from the Tumblr from the Dark Knight trilogy, but absolutely love it. Like my son loves it too. But I actually bought him a that Batmobile. He's got several Batmobiles. He's got that one with the gun on top of it, and he quite likes it a lot. Um, Lex Luthor. So Jesse Eisenberg plays him in this film. Much even I'd say an even bigger controversial choice than Affleck. Affleck at least has a physical stature towards him. Again, a number of different names attached to this. So supposedly, I saw here that Adam Driver was supposedly approached first, and he said he couldn't do it. Uh, Joaquin Phoenix was approached. He passed on it, which is funny because he will end up being Joker later on in as a Batman character. On that Happy, Sad, Confused interview that Snyder did, he said that he talked to Leonardo DiCaprio about the role. And DiCaprio
Interesting.
actually came up with was intrigued by the idea and brought a lot of good ideas to the meeting. But at the end, he was like, I don't know. He said he was really smart about the material, but I don't, he just wasn't for him at the end of the day. So then we get Eisenberg. Now, I kind of understand where they're coming from with Eisenberg in regards to if you're going to be a Lex Luthor in the modern day, media would probably be like something that you have his hands on and such. And when it comes to a lot of these, what do they call them? What do they call it? What's it called
Megalomanias.
in no in America, Silicon Valley.
Oh,
When it comes to
oh,
kind of
right.
those Silicon Valley types, that was like the new era of the businessman for like this for like especially then, right? And Eisenberg of course plays Mark Zuckerberg and he was really great in it. But I just didn't like what he does with the role. He's kind of like this really chatty Cathy kind of throughout the movie. He's got all these tics and eccentricities, and I never once kind of felt any type of intimidation by him as a character. He's a man with power, but he doesn't seem like a man with power as much. He was just seemed like a boy who just had really cool kind of had a number of wealth and the tools to do with it. He kind of reminded me of Sid from Toy Story, where he's taking all the toys and he's melting them and putting them all together and stuff. That's what he seemed like to me in the role. He just wasn't someone who kind of lived up to that kind of intelligence, evil, like you said, the megalomania, all that kind of stuff there. It just didn't work for me whatsoever. And I think it's the biggest weak link of the movie. What's your thoughts of Eisenberg?
I don't know if this is true. I read this on Reddit, so it's probably not, but this is what I had heard, that Jesse Eisenberg actually thought he was playing the Riddler disguised as Lex Luthor. That
Nice. Okay.
Luthor had used the Riddler as like a body double, basically,
Right.
to do all this, and it was supposed to introduce the Riddler because he was going, if it had gone to, because Justice League 2 was supposed to introduce the Legion of Doom,
Right.
so or the Injustice Gang, whatever you want to call them. But and Riddler was going to be the Batman villain in that group, and that has pretty much been confirmed. That the Riddler was supposed to be part of the DCEU, but uh, but he was surprised when he was told, "Oh, no, this is Lex Luthor. This is Lex Luthor. The Riddler's going to come along later."
Hmm.
I think he was supposed to have a cameo in the Batman film with that Ben Affleck was supposed to direct. I think
Right.
that was how they were going to introduce the Riddler, but that ultimately we'll never know. That film never got made, sadly. I would have actually probably, I've changed my mind on that. Before I thought it was a bad idea, but after hearing Affleck's ideas for it, I think it could have worked. But back to Eisenberg, my big issue with him is, like you were saying, he's very eccentric, he's very chatty. Lex Luthor is very intimidating. He always wears power suits, always in like these black suits with a white tie to make the tie stand out. And he's very methodical. And I didn't feel like Luthor was methodical. Also, his motivation for hating Superman, I felt, was very lackluster.
Hmm.
Usually there's one of three reasons: is Superman causes the accident that makes him lose his hair and he just is so petty he can't get over it. Two, he's just jealous of Superman because he used to be Metropolis's favorite son, and then Superman comes along. And then the third one, which was introduced in the New 52, was he sees Superman as an infection. He's not of
Hmm.
this earth, he's a disease and a parasite. We have to get rid of him. So those are usually the three reasons why Luthor doesn't like Superman. But with this one, it was just like he doesn't like Superman because Superman didn't save him from his abusive father. Like you could
Hmm.
say that about any of the other superheroes Luthor is tracking, right? Why Superman in particular, other than he's just so powerful? But that was my big complaint about it, was what is his motivation for being against Superman? And in fact, if you watch the movie, it seems like he should be more mad at Batman for for all the trouble Batman causes him. But that was kind of my big thing: is where is the motivation behind this? Like, even if it's a petty one, like kind of how it is in the one with or the James Gunn Superman. It's a very petty. I don't like Superman because Metropolis chose him, and I'm jealous of him. Like, sure, that's might be a small motivation, but at least it's a motivation that I can at least understand. Going from being the big man on campus to not, I can kind of see how that would work, especially in someone like Lex Luthor. In the comics, he's a major narcissist. So, and we see that with Gene Hackman's portrayal of him and Kevin Spacey's
Hmm.
portrayal of Lex Luthor, and it was just lacking that gravitas that Luthor has. And I don't blame J.C. Eisenberg from that. That it was not his decision to go that direction with that character. That was on Snyder and Goyer ultimately. But that I would say that's where the hangup was for me, is in that narrow space where why does he want to get rid of Superman? We don't know. It doesn't make it, they never made it clear. Even in the Ultimate Edition, I was like, oh well, they explained the lead thing in Ultimate Edition, maybe they'll explain the motivations behind it, and they ultimately didn't. So no pun intended.
If I had like a device on me where I can go back in time and change things in regards to casting and directions of a movie, I have an idea that it could maybe shape up this film. Imagine that this isn't Batman versus Superman, but it's just Man of Steel 2, Superman 2. Now imagine Lex Luthor played by Ben Affleck.
Hmm.
And imagine the reason why Lex Luthor hates Superman so much is because of the events that happened in Metropolis in the first movie. Maybe one of those buildings had his work in there. Maybe something rather like something like that. And then he uses his power, uses his resources, kind of similar to kind of like what Batman's doing in this movie, but he does it in a way to smear Batman to try to fight Batman. He gets his hands on kryptonite, all that kind of stuff. Like that could have been pretty cool because Ben Affleck knows can play a jerk really well. He can play those kind of egocentric kind of characters. And thing about Lex Luthor, especially I found in the comics as well, is that and even with Gene Hackman, like Gene Hackman was quite a big guy. He was quite like a big kind of imposing guy. He was a former Marine and stuff like that as well. Um, he himself just like he was like a big kind of stout kind of guy, and I thought Ben Affleck as a Lex Luthor would have been interesting. Even shave his head, maybe I don't know. It would have been interesting to see it, maybe not. But I thought that would have been an interesting way to go because the way that they had it in here, like you and I have talked about, it just doesn't work whatsoever. And it's really a shame that when as going back again to where we're talking about the different approaches sometimes directors and writers and such have this material. When they play cute with so many stuff, a lot of times it just doesn't work. And it just one fumble is all that's needed in a really pivotal piece of casting or direction, and everything kind of just falls over afterwards. I mean, Affleck in himself was quite a risk, I think, casting him in the movie, even though in my opinion I think it worked out pretty cool. Um, but the Eisenberg one, I still to this day, I still do not understand it. I still don't get it.
Well,
it does feel like he's playing a different character in the movie. It really does.
and part of me wonders because Man of Steel was supposed to go before Batman versus Superman. Batman was supposed to have a cameo in Man of Steel 2, and then that was gonna
Yeah.
lead into Batman versus Superman and then into Justice League. But because of I think you mentioned while we were off air, it was with Civil War coming,
Yeah.
Marvel's Captain America Civil War, originally titled Avengers Civil War. They pushed up the Batman versus Superman script, and so Zack Snyder had to stuff a bunch of stuff in that was supposed to be in Man of Steel 2 that didn't make it. So there's a small part of me, even though, like I said, I don't like Zack Snyder as a director. I wonder how, in an alternate universe where Man of Steel 2 got made before
First,
Batman
yeah.
versus Superman, how it would have played out, and maybe it would have made more sense to us if it, like you said, it had been a Superman versus Lex Luthor film that established the character and had way more time to establish him versus in a Batman crossover film.
It is interesting because at the time, what we were used to, especially with what the MCU was doing, was what they set up all the individual films, all the characters, set up their worlds, all that kind of stuff, and then it led to the big kind of team up thing. And Batman versus Superman ended up becoming kind of like a mini version of the Justice League in a way, and we're going to go to now as Gal Gadot playing Wonder Woman in a film. Now, I know over the years, Gal Gadot has had a big hit reputation-wise. There's actually one lady on Instagram that does Gal Gadot impressions. Simply fantastic. I forgot what her name was, but I'll put the link in the show notes. It's simply great. But I actually liked what she did as Wonder Woman. I do like that Wonder Woman film, the Patty Jenkins one that was set during World War One. I thought that was pretty cool. I thought that Gal Gadot did a good job as Wonder Woman in the film. There was other people that was like kind of attached to playing it. Olga Kurylenko, the Ukrainian actress, supposedly she was in the running to maybe do it.
She would have made a good
Uh,
Wonder Woman. I
she would
like
have
her.
been
She's a
really
good
good.
actress.
She is. She's very good. I think she would have been great as well. And I think Jamie Alexander from Thor, who played Sif in the Thor movies, she was also in consideration. But I don't know if you saw lately, but she's been doing some interviews talking about like a bad drinking problem she had during post Thor, which kind of derailed a lot of her career. Like I saw one interview where she
Hmm.
said she actually showed up to an audition for a big film drunk, and that she got kicked out of the casting, which is probably why we don't see a lot of it. I think she kind of burnt some bridges there. But
Hmm.
she would have been cool as well. But we do have Gal Gadot. She's great in the film, but again, not really needed in the movie. I always thought that the third act of this movie, outside of some of the action scenes, which I thought were really good, the introduction of Wonder Woman, the whole Doomsday kind of thing in it as well, the death of Superman at the end of it, all of that stuff is stuff that you save for later. I think, and not to be crude here, to for anyone listening, whatever you, I think Snyder and the Warner people shot their wad too early in regards to a lot of this stuff that's happening in this movie. Um, it's a long movie, but we need to see these things kind of play out like in a different film. we needed to see that conclusion come later on. And maybe they were trying not to go too far into the MCU formula, so it doesn't look like they were kind of copycatting what was happening there. Have 5 films, do the big team up, phase one, what have you. But it works. It was a formula that worked, and I think it was a formula that maybe um, a lot of these guys over at Warner and Snyder should have followed. Because I think just having like at least one more Superman movie or maybe one Batman movie and then having the team up and then doing all that other stuff would have worked way better. Unfortunately, it all just gets crammed into this movie here. And maybe in the director's cut, you talk about the Ultimate Edition, it probably flows much better. But I always found that even though Godot was good in this movie, I do like her as Wonder Woman. It just too much at once at the end there, and I want the stakes. You need to have the stakes, and a lot of times you need those stakes by establishing just who these characters are, in their respective worlds, and it just didn't happen here, which I thought was a shame because I do like her as Wonder Woman. I do like that first Wonder Woman movie, but just have introducing her in this movie in a way that they do, I just don't think it worked at all in the film. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere.
Yeah, and that it goes back to the problem with the motivations, right? So you have Wonder Woman who's been quiet for decades, just getting over, as they say, getting over her grief with Steve Trevor, and it gets undercut by Wonder Woman, the movie, where, because they put it so. I actually heard that Snyder wanted to be set during the Boer War, so that would have been even earlier, and they kind of forced him to move it up to World War One. So you're kind of like, that's way too long to just be dealing with the death of a loved one, right? She's a demigod, she's not, I could see that with a regular person, but she's supposed to be a demigod, a part of the Amazons. And then Wonder Woman 1984, of course, really messed that up.
Yeah.
But we don't have to talk about that one. I'm sure that's a whole other episode. But I like her as Wonder Woman. I think now because of her misstep during COVID with that whole Imagine thing, and then
Snow White.
She has not been, and Snow White, and also Heart of Stone, which was just kind of a very B movie. I think she should fire her agent for sure, because I just feel like she's not getting good parts, and I think that utilize her because she's kind of like a female. I guess you could say John Wayne. John Wayne, he played basically John Wayne in every movie, but he was really good at that. And I think Gal Gadot has that same thing. She is just Gal Gadot. And when she gets a role like Wonder Woman, where she can, show off her skills, at least in that range, then she does really well. But when she tries to stretch, but again, it's like, why would Doomsday motivate her to suddenly get out of her apathy? If it's because Superman's around, well, Superman's been around for 18 months, right? Man of Steel Batman versus Superman takes place 18 months after Man of Steel. So why didn't she come out of hiding in that gap? Like it just doesn't, again, it just doesn't make sense. It goes to the motivation. But yeah, I think they should have, if they wanted to use her as sort of a Deus Ex Machina character, they really approached it all wrong. For a while in the comics, Wonder Woman did not participate with the Justice League. She was a secret agent. She worked for, the name of the organization escapes me, but she was a secret agent. She decided she didn't like the politics of the Justice League. I think Vixen or Zatanna took her place, so she became a secret agent. If they had explained it as, I couldn't go public because I've been working for the organization that Steve Trevor was a part of, then I could see why she was in hiding for so long. But just her not getting over Trevor's death, that does for decades, that just doesn't make sense to me. But it did feel, and also I feel like the second trailer that they released, the Comic-Con trailer was fantastic, but then they did that second trailer where it reveals what's going to happen. Well, now you know what's going to happen. So I think that also took because in the first trailer where she just kind of has a quick glimpse, people thought she was Catwoman.
Mm.
And then it would have been like a surprise in the theater. Oh my gosh, she's Wonder Woman. I think that was a big misstep, revealing who she was too early, because even with the lack of motivation and some of the criticisms you have, it would have at least been a shock. Oh, because we all thought she was Catwoman, and oh no, wait, she's actually Wonder Woman. I think that then like these 10 year later conversations, we can say, oh, but was it that good? We've gotten over it's more of the hindsight conversation, like people are starting to do with Spider-Man No Way Home. But I that's kind of my take on it, is why and why was she in hiding for so long? Why did it take her so long to get over her dead boyfriend? Being a demigod, put away everything else. Just she's a demigod. She literally killed Ares. How is she not getting over the loss of a loved one decades later, if that makes any sense?
Yeah. So Batman vs Superman releases March 19, 2016. It had a big premiere. Then it had a worldwide United States release, sorry, of March 25. Grossed $874 million worldwide on a budget of between 250 and $325 million. A huge budget. However, even though it made that much money, it was only the seventh highest grossing film of 2016, which is very, very interesting. Back in the good old days when there was a number of films nearing $1 billion. Now, when we look back on it 10 years from now, I think there's a lot of things to like about the film. I think the biggest problem I think we have, just us talking about it as well, and I think a lot of people have it as well, just comes down to just storytelling,
Mm-hmm.
or the direction in this movie. I think the storytelling is something that's always just kind of bothered me in regards to the DCEU kind of like movies. The way that they approach the introduction of characters, the way that they, cast the characters as well was a big problem. And it's a shame because I don't know about you, but this movie really had potential to be something kind of like, you know, remarkable in the whole kind of superhero movie kind of canon. For some reason, it just didn't come together like it should have. Where do we place blame on this for? Because my opinion is that I think I'm going to place blame on Warner rushing to try to compete with Marvel. I think the whole Marvel Tina thing and the success that they had with it, with Avengers and Civil War coming up as well, I think they were trying too hard to capture that same energy and such. But the problem that I have is that, and you said it yourself, when it comes to just the comics in general, Marvel and DC, even though it's the same medium, it's the same art, it's the same genre, whatever. They're two very distinct kind of things. You ask anyone, if you like, I got all my comic books here, right? If I'm reading, Shadow of the Bat or whatever, that's going to be way different than reading like the Marvel stuff. Where all the Marvel stuff does have like a tone, a style to it. DC has that as well, and they should have recognized that more in regards to the property that they have. And I think sometimes people in the movie industry, and I think this happens a lot. This happens in sport as well, I think as well. They're so preoccupied about how the other person is succeeding and how they do it. They try to duplicate that, and it ends up just being a pale comparison. And you've had this one chance and you kind of blew it. And I think that's what happened with the whole DCEU experiment at the end of the day.
I totally agree with you. I think with the fault of Warner Brothers was they picked Zack Snyder to lead it, and I, as I said earlier, I think that was the wrong decision. But they also didn't give him time to flesh out his vision for it.
Right.
And they did the same thing after they kicked out Snyder. They did the same thing to Walter Hamada. Zaslav is doing the same thing with James Gunn. They're not giving them time to breathe. And I think that is the story of Warner Media, because a lot of people don't realize this. Warner actually owns DC Comics, like Marvel, like Disney owns Marvel now. It used to not be that way. Marvel used to be its own company. It was called Marvel Entertainment. Disney comes along and buys them. That's why the first Avengers movie is actually Paramount. It's not Disney. They were, a lot of the characters were under Paramount, but Warner Brothers has always micromanaged how they did the DC characters. And even when they farmed them out to like Fox, which did Gotham, the TV show, they had an incredibly strict set of rules that Gotham had to follow, which I think ultimately hurt the show, especially if you watch it. And I think they did the same thing to Zack Snyder. And like I was saying earlier, I feel like if there's another universe where they said, you know what, Marvel's doing Civil War, let them do Civil War. We're going to go ahead and keep going with Man of Steel. We're gonna let Zack Snyder do Man of Steel 2. That'll lead into Batman versus Superman and etc. I wonder if it would have worked better, even for someone who's a Snyder critic like myself. I wonder if, because I'm not saying Zack Snyder has never done a good film. I like 300. I like the Owls of Ga'Hoole, but it's part of my problem is when he adapts other people's works, he doesn't understand their core elements. But I think if they had let him work with other people, because before he was only really working with Frank Miller and with Goyer, etc. And because you have to pull in more people to eventually, that's actually what happened to Joss Whedon when he was tasked with recutting Justice League. It was done by committee. They were actually, as much, I know Joss Whedon has been kind of Me Too'd and all that, but they were micromanaging how he was putting that movie together. And I feel like with Snyder, if they had just loosened the reins a little bit and we had gotten Man of Steel 2, Batman versus Superman, Justice League, The Batman by Ben Affleck, and all the other spinoffs, and then finally he wanted to do the Justice League 2 was going to be the big finale that was going to reset everything, is my understanding of, if I recall his original vision. But they just kept interfering, and then you get the whole thing with Shazam, which, in my opinion, I like Shazam as a character, the original Captain Marvel, but I think that was, like you were saying, it was just the studio was trying to rush out and compete with Marvel, and they didn't have to. I actually am of the opinion that they should have done, because after the Nolan trilogy, they were going to do a film called Justice League Mortals. Right. And that film was supposed to spin off characters. So it was going to be it was going to be Dark Knight Rises. That was going to close that. They were going to do Justice League Mortals. I believe Armie Hammer was supposed to play that. Well, that's hard to believe.
Yeah. George Miller was going to direct
it. Yes, George Miller was supposed to do it. And they tried to get Jessica Biel to be Wonder Woman and all this. And it was supposed to spin them off. And I think that if they had kept with that idea, do the big movie first and then do prequels and spinoffs and sequels, I think that would have worked better for DC, because they could have said, hey, we work better. Because if you look at comic book sales, Batman in particular always outsells Marvel, right, by leaps and bounds. And so I think I think that was another reason why they micromanaged him to put Batman versus Superman first before Man of Steel 2. But yeah, that's what two reasons is the horse they backed, and the studio interference. Warner Brothers just needs to, whenever they pick someone to say, hey, rebuild our universe, they just need to let him run with it. And like I said, they did the same thing to Walter Hamada. They did the same thing they're doing the same thing to James Gunn. And so in another universe where they just said, hey, Zach, we're just going to trust you, go with it. And if it bombs, we're going to do it our way. I think if it had turned out that way, maybe we'd be having a different discussion. You and I might be talking about Man of Steel 2 instead of Batman versus Superman. But yeah, that's kind of my take on it. I think that they should have just let him do his thing, give it a try, and maybe things would have turned out differently.
So just looking at that cast of Justice League Mortal, so DJ Cotrona was cast as Superman. Armie Hammer, you just mentioned Batman. So the character of Wonder Woman ended up being played by Megan Gale, who is an Australian supermodel.
Oh, that's right. Bill turned it down. They approached Bill and she turned it down. That's right.
Then you had Teresa Palmer as Talia al Ghul. Adam Brody as the Flash. I reckon he'll be great as it. J.B. Rochelle as the lead villain, Maxwell Lord. Yeah, I mean, there was quite a cast here altogether. They were going to make the whole thing kind of just imploded. It didn't go anywhere.
Well, because Green Lantern didn't do well, because Green Lantern was supposed to be connected to Justice League Mortals.
Right. Okay. So that didn't work out. So But it's interesting where we are now in regards to the whole Warner DC kind of thing, because as some people might know, Paramount have purchased Warner Media. So now superheroes are back at Paramount because people forget, and like you mentioned it just now, Paramount was originally the home of the MCU. That first phase was all Paramount. And I remember specifically always going here in Dan City to the Paramount Pictures theaterette where we watch all the critic screenings and all that, and watching Captain America and Iron Man 2 and thinking to myself, wow, they're really pulling this off. This is pretty incredible. And then I went to Disney, and now we know where we're all at with everything else with Disney and these movies. Um, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens now it's back at Paramount because, like you said, James Gunn has taken the reins and they kind of did Superman movie that came out last year, which I haven't seen because I kind of have fatigue right of superhero movies. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen Fantastic Four. I just haven't seen a new superhero movie. I'm waiting for Batman, the Batman too. That's the next one I'll probably watch. Um, but yeah, I'm wondering what's going to happen now. Are they going to just stop the gun experiment? Are they going to try to do it refresh? What have you heard? Have you heard anything in regards to what Paramount plans might be? Is it too early to tell? Is it just purely just speculation right now?
I've heard two rumors. The first one is Ellison apparently is friends with Snyder and he wants to bring him back to do
Right.
Man of Steel 2. I
Right.
don't, that would be super confusing to viewers. Like I know
Yes.
I remember there was a bat embargo that's why Batman couldn't appear on Smallville. That wouldn't have confused viewers. Batman on TV and Batman in the viewer in the movies that the audience can differentiate. But you go from, hey, we're going to reboot this. Oh no, not really. Here's another movie. And he is interested in bringing him back and even uh, trying to do the Rock experiment, but not with the Rock's idea, just bringing him back to be Black Adam, basically.
Right.
And but the second rumor is if Supergirl performs well, then James Gunn is staying.
Right.
So everything hinges on Supergirl. Lanterns is a TV show, and Ellison, is very curious about it. I honestly think that because Paramount, prior to the purchase of Warner Brothers, they also owned Mirage Studios, which is Ninja Turtles. So now DC and Mirage Studios are under the same banner. So you could even do potential Ninja Turtle crossovers and other Mirage Studio characters. Uh, Usagi no Jimbo is one of them. But that's what I have heard. It's that Ellison is apparently doesn't like Gunn. He didn't even invite Gunn to. Now this is true. He didn't invite Gunn to an executive meeting.
Hmm.
Peter Safran was invited, but not Gunn. And Gunn played it off as, "Oh, I'm directing Supergirl. That's why I wasn't there. I'm getting ready for the release of Supergirl." But that is not a good sign. So that really kind of added fuel to the fire that he wants to bring back Snyder. But again, I've heard they've said that um, the super everything hinges on Supergirl, and so there's probably re-edits going on.
Hmm.
A lot of people don't know this, but Supergirl is based on a run by a man named Tom King. He wrote a Supergirl series called Woman of Tomorrow, which was the original name of the movie. It was called Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. Comic book fans do not like Tom King.
Right.
Every superhero he has written, the sales have dropped. He did Batman, sales dropped. It was the first time ever Batman sales had dropped as dramatically as they did. He Supergirl, he did the Human Target, which is he's like a bodyguard character. He's not a superhero, but he exists in the DC universe. Oh, Mr. Miracle, and every single character he wrote for, they all tanked. So apparently there's rumors that Gunn is trying to do some reshoots to de-king the Supergirl film. Because before Gunn didn't care, he had like a blank check from Zaslav because Zaslav just wants to make money. Zaslav, he's from the Home Shopping Network. He does not give a hoot and a half about these characters. So Ellison does, though. Ellison has said as soon as they bought Paramount, what did he say? We want to explore Star Trek. What was the other? He mentioned two other franchises, but he wants to. Oh, the Ninja Turtles, and then he named one other one. So he definitely is interested in those crowd pleaser franchises. So
Hmm.
I could see it going either way. I actually don't think Snyder is going to return. I hate to break it to the Snyder Bros. I know they've been waiting for that, but I think with the antics at Netflix, with everything that went wrong with Rebel Moon, and then with his sequel to Dawn of the Dead, I think that uh, City of the Dead and City of Thieves, right? Those two, those
Right.
weren't well received, and so I think maybe his goodwill from his earlier films prior to the DCEU have kind of burned that out. But I've also heard, because Taylor Sheridan, he left Paramount, but I heard Ellison is trying to lure him back. So after, because he left pre-Ellison, so Ellison is trying to lure him back, and which they just released another show from Sheridan, which
Yeah,
tells
Madison.
me,
Yeah.
yeah, which tells me he might be on his way back to Paramount. And I would love to see a Batman film with Sheridan producing. I think that would be fantastic. But I don't. I think all that to say, those are the two rumors I've heard. Snyder's coming back, or if Supergirl does well, they're going to just let it be. So that's what I am hearing through all the grapevines. I don't know if that. I don't know if either of those are true. Obviously I can't confirm any of that. I don't know James Gunn. Although he and I did get into a very public argument one time on X. That was kind of funny. But the but I do but that's kind of where I'm waiting to see, because the HBO shows aren't really helping Gunn, especially
No.
with what happened with the Lanterns comments. And then apparently Peacemaker season 2, people were really disappointed in. So same with Creature Commandos. And I got to give Gunn a little bit of pointers here. He knows what the fans want. So I'm not a big Creature Commandos fan, but I know people who are. They have been waiting to see them appear in anything.
Mm.
But the execution was very poor. So everyone was excited. Oh, we're finally getting Creature Commandos. But then no one ended up liking it, because they made this big thing about the Sons of the Mascara and all this. They were just incels and all this. The incels were the bad guys. No one wants to watch that. No one wants to watch a vampire eat a bunch of incels. I'm sorry, but
Right.
or Frankenstein eat a bunch of incels. But I I guess a long about way. I think that if I was to put money on it, I think the second rumor is true, that it hinges on Supergirl performing well, and also because if the Batman Part 2 by Matt Reeves performs well, that's not going to reflect on Gunn, because Gunn has
No.
done everything to distance himself from that movie.
Right.
So it's all up to Supergirl at this point. Is my take from it. I think that part of the rumor is true.
I think the best thing for any DC thing going forward, in my opinion, is to just do standalone films. I think in sort of like I think the whole sharing universes kind of thing, like superheroes appearing here and there, and everything else. I think the standalone film concept will work better now, I think, than it did before. The whole MCU experiment. Now we're into what, movie number 30 something, 40 something maybe. With Doomsday coming up, I think it's kind of weathered a lot of people are going to the movies. I think it's had an impact as well on the box office. I really do, and I think standalone films work. I like the Batman. I like that first Joker with Todd Phillips. I thought that was pretty cool as well. A standalone Superman movie without any other heroes involved in it, because this, I think, from what I understand of this last Superman film, there's like a whole bunch of different like characters in that, right?
Yeah,
Like,
there's four.
yeah, so just have it just have Superman, Lois, Lex, just have that going on just in one movie. That'll be might be cool.
And
Um,
DC
yeah,
Comics was originally built that way. Marvel
yeah.
was built intended to be a shared comic book universe.
Can you hear me, Jake?
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
What? Yeah, I
Sorry,
can hear
you,
you.
you just froze there. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, Marvel was built when they were first being published by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko to be a shared universe. DC was not. DC brought in a bunch of characters. They were because of a merger, but they just let them stay separate with occasional crossovers through comics like The Brave and the Bold and World's Finest. But them all being in like a togetherness is a new idea. Really didn't really happen until the 80s. I mean, like I said, crossover. There were some Justice League and Teen Titans comics, but they still stayed pretty separate in their individual titles. So I could see a DC Universe film franchise going forward in that manner.
Well, 10 years since Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice, still as divisive as it was before. Some good parts to it, some parts that still kind of stick in our craw, as you can tell. But overall, a fascinating experiment of trying to put together, I think, two of the biggest comic book superhero characters of all time in the one movie, under the direction of a filmmaker who, in himself, is a divisive figure on the work that he's presented on the screen so far. And we'll probably see it again in the future. Who knows? But right now, Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice on its 10th anniversary is kind of like the place where you want to go see these guys like tangle on the screen. Jacob Airey, I thank you very much for your time. Remember, everyone out there, in the links, we're going to go to Jacob's Substack, his YouTube page, links to his books as well that he has over at Amazon. If you like fantasy, kind of like up stories and such things like that, Jacob Airey's books, they're the ones you need to go to check out. So that's going to be there as well. And it's going to be interesting to see, Jacob, what it's going to be like when that Supergirl movie comes out, if it is going to live up to the financial expectations that Warner has on it, and what happens after that with the whole Paramount merger, because we could see this happen again. Maybe we are going to see standalone films again. Either way, this movie is in the can, and so is this podcast. And I thank you so very much for your time today.
And thank you for having me. I had a great conversation.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.